So, this is part 5 of the Ottoman Portuguese War. Yesterday we looked at the Abyssinian Abdal War and how the Adals are just dominating Ethiopia now. So, I guess it's going to be the continuation of that and seeing how that all wraps up.
But all was not lost for the Solomonic kingdom, and the following years would see a new force enter the fray, countering the Ottoman support. In 1535, with his own armies on the run, the vanquished emperor had sent an appeal for aid to the King of Portugal. Portuguese aid would not arrive within his lifetime, but the call for help he sent may well have saved his dynasty. Not long after the ascension of his son Golorgios.
Okay, I was wondering, because last time we covered how the Ottomans basically gave aid to the Adals and helped them solidify most of Ethiopia. I was like, how is this going to affect the Portuguese? But good to see that the Christian side called on Portugal, and now the Portuguese are going to come, and it feels like a Cold War almost. Like, granted, the Portuguese, I imagine, are going to be a bit more hands-on, maybe? I don't know, but, like, this seems like a proxy war going on here in Ethiopia, but in the much larger conflict of the Ottomans and the Portuguese, and their struggle to have power over the Indian Ocean. So it's cool. I didn't expect this to take, like a proxy war kind of route, but this is very interesting, and I am really happy to see how things are going in Africa.
400 Portuguese musketmen, along with numerous craftsmen and gunsmiths, arrived in Massawa in February of 1541, where they were joined by small contingents of loyal Ethiopian warriors. Sebla, Queen Mother of Ethiopia, served as their guide and attaché as they marched out in hopes of joining their force to that of Golorgios. Pushing into the Tigray region, they won a number of decisive battles, despite the greatly superior numbers of the Adalite garrisons. Gren himself was injured during an utter rout at Jata, leading Cristoval's chronicler, Miguel de Castagnoso, to declare that with 100 horses to pursue with, the whole threat of Adal might have been ended. However, the rainy season slowed Cristavo's advance into Tigray considerably, and a number of Adalite-held fortresses still stood between him and Golorgios. And while the local populace largely supported Cristavo as a fellow Christian, Adalite forces in the region remained an ever-present threat.
Alright, the complete power of the war has shifted, as Cristavo and the Portuguese have instantly reversed the situation, and now it seems like more even. Yeah, like Adol, his big advantage last time, definitely the Ottoman backing, but also the cannons, and just the technological edge in terms of weaponry. He seems to have lost that advantage, now the Adals are on the back foot.
42, the broader Ottoman Portuguese War was at its height. The defeat at Diu had been just 4 years earlier, with the Ottoman fleet still at large as Sultan Suleiman searched for new ways to undermine his Portuguese rivals. Thus, when Ahmad Gren's call for help brought news of the Portuguese presence in Ethiopia to Suleiman's attention, the Adal War became a new front against a major rival. Determined not to allow Portuguese-backed Ethiopia to gain a presence in the Gulf of Aden and block off the Red Sea again, and hoping to stamp out the tenacious Christian kingdom entirely, Suleiman authorized a sizable expedition to enter the war on the Adalite side. From Zabid in Yemen, 900 Turkish and 2,000 Arab soldiers embarked across the Red Sea to aid their African ally. When Cristavo returned to Wufla in August 1542, fresh off his victory seizing Amber Cell back from the Adalites to open the path to Golorgios, he was unwittingly walking into the jaws of the much larger Ottoman Adalite force. On August 28th, the Portuguese expedition was shattered in the Battle of Wufla. Some 120 Portuguese managed to escape the slaughter, fleeing with Seblawengal, while the rest either fell in battle or became prisoners of the Sultan. Kristavo was among the captured, though he would not live long in Ahmad Gren's custody.
Okay, the fall. Man, this keeps going back and forth. Now that the main Ottomans are getting involved, you know, sending aid and wanting to straight up just get rid of the Christian presence of Ethiopia, that's quite the shift. And with Kristavo gone, man, I don't know how this is gonna go. The Adals seem to be the more aggressive of the two, I'll say that. At least from what I'm getting. The Adals are just, yeah, way more aggressive, and that sneak attack was brilliantly executed. So, I don't know, I'm like leaning towards the Adals personally, but who knows how this could end. This could either end with the Adals winning, or maybe some type of stalemate, I don't know, but there's a lot at stake here on both sides, right? Like, whoever kind of wins here kind of... If the Portuguese were to win, the Red Sea blocked once again, that would be incredibly unbeneficial towards the Ottomans. The Ottomans win, then the Red Sea remains open and they continue their operations in India, right?
After 13 years of war, with the Portuguese defeated, Ahmad Gren seems to have concluded that at this point his victory was complete. To an outside observer, this conclusion might have seemed a safe one, but Gren's assumption that the remaining Portuguese had simply scattered was incorrect. The 120 soldiers left of the expedition had in fact retreated back through Ambacel to join up with Golorduos. As their excess supplies and powder had been safely stored in Ambacel when Kristavo met with disaster in Wafla, they were able to arm and train numerous Ethiopians to fight as musketmen.
Oh!
Several long months were spent in training and preparation, with the first Ethiopian-made muskets and gunpowder being produced to further narrow the advantage in arms and numbers held by the Adalites.
Oh, dang. Oh my gosh, we got Ethiopian musketmen. Okay, that's cool to see. The Portuguese are still, the remnants are still helping turn the tide of battle. I actually want to see I want to see a full-on pitched battle now. Like, I think this is definitely going to be the battle here. So, I'm not going to try to pronounce that. But, wait, maybe I can. Wayna Daga? The Battle of Wayna Daga? I want to see who the heck is gonna win.
Finally, on February 6, 1543, Golorduos marched out for Lake Tana at the head of his new combined army. Lebna Dengel's army had been unprepared for gunpowder warfare, and Kristavo's had been small and unfamiliar with the landscape. But Golorduos's combined the strengths of both into something far greater. On February 21st,
the best of both worlds,
met the Adalites in what would be the deciding battle of the war. Though outnumbered, they took Ahmad Grenya and his forces by surprise, secure as the Adalites were in their victory. Accounts of the battle are unfortunately somewhat questionable, most significantly the numbers of soldiers involved, with the Chronicle claiming 9,000 Ethiopians against 15,000 Adalites. As the Ethiopian monarchy had only just a few years earlier been effectively exiles, it seems unlikely they could have so rapidly mobilized an army larger than the army Lebna Dengel had drawn from the whole of a unified Ethiopia. And as the Adalites were not on active campaign when they met Golorduos at Lake Tana, well within what they considered safely subdued territory, it is equally unlikely that Grenya would have the entirety of his forces mobilized. Most of the warriors he had relied upon during his conquests were pastoralist tribes, which would have returned to their lands and herds with the plunder of the previous year's victories. But even if the numbers are exaggerated, the significance of the battle's outcome can hardly be overstated. the Adalites fought bravely and competently despite the disarray the Ethiopians had caught them in, buoyed up as they were by the skilled Ottoman and Yemeni gunners and by their own years of hard-won experience. But the addition of gunnery to the Ethiopian army would doom the Adalite campaign. Ahmad Gran found his position the target of concentrated volleys of musket fire. Soon enough, a bullet found its way through the Adalite lines to the intended target of the barrage, killing the Imam and shattering Adalite morale. Another tradition holds that their surprise and disorganization allowed for a single Portuguese musketeer to rush a gap in their lines, reaching Ahmad Gran himself as he shouted orders over the deafening musket fire. Mere moments later, both fell, mortally wounded, the musketeer having shot Gran through the breast before being set upon.
Dang, man. I was like kind of on the edge of my seat there. I didn't know who the heck was gonna win. There's so much was riding on this fight. And again, the Portuguese training came in clutch with their musketry. I don't think musketry is musketry a word? Alright, it's a new word I'm coining. Musketry. Their musket training definitely like came into clutch there. And that killing the leader of the Adals, huge W. Winning the battle, huge W. Overall, Portuguese W. Wow.
By the surrounding Adalite soldiers. This heroic account is not related by Castanhosa and is likely a fabrication, but however the Imam's death came to be, its impact on his forces was the same. The past 14 years of war had been the product of one man's vision. The shock of his death broke the morale of the Adalites, and in a remarkably close echo to the Portuguese flight after Cristava's death, the remnants of the Turkish and Yemeni force fled back to the coast of Adel with Gran's widow, Bati del Wembara. On the battlefield they left behind, Gran's body was beheaded, with the grisly trophy displayed to all surrounding countryside to spread word of the great conqueror's passing.
Wow.
The war would drag on for 5 years further, with Adel under the control of Gran's nephew, Nur ibn Mujahid, due to his son's capture by the Portuguese, though Gran's death had largely ended the existential threat Adel posed to Ethiopia. Though Adel retained much of its strong army, Nur failed to inspire the same dread or loyalty his uncle had, leading to a gradual Ethiopian reclamation of the lost territories. Nur's legacy would not be in the form of conquest, but in the construction of Harar's impressive and still standing walls. Soon, the war turned to stalemate, and then to peace between the two bloodied and exhausted powers. Adal retained dominion over the coast and freedom from the tributes a stronger Ethiopia had levied on the coastal Muslim states in ages past, making the war a victory from the Ottoman perspective. Though Ethiopia would retain its ties to Portugal, it would not play any major role in combating the Ottomans in the Indian Ocean without proper coastal access. But from the perspective of Adal, and especially Ethiopia, the war had been catastrophically destructive. The following decades would see a new force emerge to challenge both states in the form of migrating Oromo tribes, with the battered and exhausted nations helpless to combat their advance.
Oh no. So it's like a freaking Roman-Persian situation with the Muslims just showed up out of nowhere after they exhausted themselves, right? My goodness. But, wait, keep going.
Those great walls would be put to the test, not by the Ethiopians they had been built to ward off, but by the Oromo, shortly before the Sultanate's collapse in 1577.
Okay, so that's the end of that. That was an interesting proxy side war, and it's overall a part of the main conflict of the Ottomans and the Portuguese. But that was interesting. I didn't expect to go there, but overall, yeah, another awesome battle. And I guess in a way it was a Ottoman strategic victory in a sense, right? Because they still got to keep the port. They still got to not get blockaded from the Red Sea, which is what the Portuguese kind of wanted to do. So overall, I guess strategic victory for the Ottomans there. Huh.